Hello, so I'm gonna make a video trying to explain falsification in relation to religious language and religion in general. So I'll start off by just explaining the falsification principle of what I can remember of it. I've got notes next to me, but I'm gonna try not to use them too much. Yeah. Okay, so falsification was a response to the development of falsification was a response to the failure of the verification principle. And the verification principle I think I've talked about in my other videos, which was developed by the logical positivists, of analytic, synthetic and meaningless statements. So that was verification, but that test, the verification principle actually failed its own test, so it broke itself down and reduced it down to nothingness, basically. So Karl came along and he developed the falsification principle, and it's a lot more scientific in that it uses the hypothetical deductive method. So it'll state a hypothesis or a prediction of what may happen, and then what happens then is you set out to falsify that claim by doing tests. And this is generally what happens with science. It's like you have to lay out a set of things which would have to, a set of conditions of which could falsify the claim that you've made about, let's say, the universe, for example, with the Big Bang. So we can assume that the Big Bang started the universe because, sorry if you know there's a car outside. We assume that the Big Bang started the universe because the universe is expanding, so we're still experiencing the Big Bang today. But however, if a condition which would falsify the Big Bang is that... 1 minute. Okay, so however, a fact which would falsify the Big Bang, or the theory of the Big Bang, would be that the universe is not expanding. Therefore, we don't have evidence to suggest that the Big Bang has actually occurred. And therefore we have to find a new hypothesis of which we can then apply the same method, which would be the hypothetical deductive method. We then postulate that hypothesis and then set out to disprove it by doing different tests, and that could be to check if the universe is expanding, to check if the different variables which support the idea of the theory are actually in place, or if they're just assumptions. Like, we have to check if those assumptions are true, and if they're not true, then we can falsify the theory. But it's the fact that that theory has the capability to be falsified that actually gives it meaning. So Karl Popper didn't think that we should apply the falsification principle to other areas of life outside of scientific endeavour, such as religion, for example. He didn't think we could apply the falsification principle to that because it's a different sort of thing. I can't remember exactly why he said this, but Okay, I'm just going to read out these bullet points from the top of this page because I think they're quite interesting, and I think that they sum up the falsification principle nicely. So it says, Karl Popper was a philosopher of science with friendly relations with the Vienna Circle. So the Vienna Circle were essentially logical positivists, and they were the ones who developed the verification principle of analytic, synthetic and meaningless statements. Okay, Karl Popper, he argued that science does not so much strive to verify as to falsify a hypothesis. So again, that's the hypothetical deductive method. It's like you don't necessarily just go out and look for evidence which supports your theory. You also have to, well, it's actually better to go out and look for evidence which goes against it, or try to falsify the claims which support the theory. Yeah, so okay, we'll try to think of more examples for that. I'm thinking evolution. Evolution seems to be based on inductive reasoning. It seems to be based on the idea that species change over time, and then they transform into other species, and this occurs across a million year period, or even multiple millions of years in time. What the hell, right? But we could, like, let's say that scientists made the observation that nothing was changing in the universe, that they couldn't actually find any evidence to support the fact that things were changing, then we could falsify the claim that evolution is the reason that we've got to where we are today, because it is not happening if you're able to falsify it. Only the fittest scientific theories should survive. Yeah, so the theories which survive the most testing and the most... Yeah, so the theories which survive the most tests are the strongest ones, are the fittest ones, because weak theories are going to be able to be falsified extremely easily when you set out to test the assumptions which the theory is built upon. If you can falsify the assumptions which the test is built upon, then the theory really isn't a strong theory at all, is it? Rather than just going out to look and verify the theory. Okay, Popper thought that falsification was much more useful than verification, but he was hesitant to apply the falsification theory beyond science to other areas, for example to religion. Okay, and I don't quite know why. Maybe it's because religion isn't necessarily scientific. Religion wasn't, well, I'll say religious scripture wasn't written with the intention of being scientific, because it was before the age of science. It was before people actually became scientific. So should we really judge religion in a scientific way? I don't know. And also, most religious believers don't necessarily. They don't say what's going to disprove their faith. Like, religious believers seem to, I don't know, they don't see what they're speaking about when they speak of faith as a scientific thing. They're much more likely to hold on to their belief in God no matter what. It's like there is a lot of things that happen in the world which go against the idea of God, but rather than allowing that evidence to tear down their religious belief, they find ways to justify that happening. For example, the problem of evil. So the problem of evil, or I guess we can sum this up with the inconsistent triad, that an omnibenevolent God shouldn't allow evil to happen in the world, because it's not very loving to allow people to suffer and allow people to die by natural disasters and by evil. And if God was all powerful or omnipotent, then he would have the power to stop the evil from occurring in the world, but he doesn't do this. So from a scientific viewpoint, that seems to be a pretty strong argument against the existence of God. Yet religious believers still choose to hold on to their faith, so they're not really susceptible to this whole idea of falsification, because they don't see their own religious belief as a scientific belief. They see it more as something based on faith. And are they right to do that? I don't know. Popper was also wary of making strong claims to truth. He suggested that conclusive truth could never be found, and that confidence in science rested in the final analysis on a decision that transcended rational argument. Okay, I don't quite know what that means neither. He was wary of making strong claims to truth. He suggested that conclusive truth could never be found, and that confidence in science rested in the final analysis on the decision that transcended rational argument. So is this the idea that we can't prove anything true for certain? Because things in the future, they could always change. We can't assume that the things that are happening in the world today are going to be exactly the same as the things that were happening in the world in the future. And also, I guess we can link it back to falsification, because we have to list a set of conditions of which would falsify a scientific theory. if we don't do this, then the theory's meaningless because you can't disprove it no matter what. So we can't say something's an absolute truth. We could say this is an absolute truth, but it wouldn't be an absolute truth if. So the Big Bang is an absolute truth, but it wouldn't be an absolute truth if the universe stopped expanding, or if certain events that occurred which went against the theory. So because it transcended rational argument. Conclusive truth could never be found, and that confidence in science. Confidence in science rested in the final analysis on a decision that transcended rational arguments. So this is the idea that people, they seem to have faith in science almost. They trust science over other means of explaining the world. And why is that? It's like that trust in science, that faith that we have in science isn't based on some sort of scientific, I don't know, assumption. It's more based on, it says it transcends rational argument, so I guess it's just based on evidence. It's like science seems to have legitimate means of explaining the world, therefore people trust the conclusions that science comes to. But I don't know if it really makes sense that it transcends the rational argument. Popper was closer to the actual practice of science than the rather utopian ideas of positivists. So the positivists, they were the guys who set out to verify, who used verification as a means of scientific testing or as a means of finding scientific truth, whereas Popper used deduction and he used falsification as a means of finding scientific truth. Therefore, he was closer to the actual practice of science. Otto Neurath, a member of the Vienna Circle, described Popper as the official opposition. And I'm guessing that's the official opposition to verification. He was the guy who really, who formulated a better theory, or I don't know. I guess it's just that his ideas are legitimate and his ideas have succeeded over the idea of verification, because verification failed its own test, but has falsification really failed its own test? I don't know. Okay, so I've still got to go into Anthony Flew, but I'm 30 minutes in, so I'll put that out there, and then I'll do like a part 2 or something. Yeah, I'll do that. Alright, thanks for watching.